March 11, 1942. General Douglas MacArthur climbs aboard a PT boat in the dead of night and slips out of the Philippines, leaving 76,000 exhausted American and Filipino soldiers behind him. He reaches Australia and tells the press 3 words that would define his legacy: "I shall return." He did. 3 years later, as a liberator, the men he left behind didn't get 3 years. Many of them didn't get 3 months. This is not a story about a battle Douglas MacArthur lost. It is a story about a promise he kept to himself while breaking one to the men under his command. Not cowardice. MacArthur followed direct orders from President Roosevelt. Not incompetence. The men on Bataan held out for 99 days against a Japanese army that had conquered nearly every other Allied position in the Pacific within weeks. What happened on Bataan was something colder. A command decision that abandoned an army to buy time for a war being fought somewhere else. This video delivers the verdict on exactly what that decision cost and exactly who paid for it. The day after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces struck the Philippines. Within a month, Manila had fallen, and American and Filipino defenders were forced back onto the Bataan Peninsula, a strip of jungle and mountain with nowhere left to retreat. MacArthur's plan depended entirely on reinforcement. Hold the line until the United States Navy could deliver troops, supplies, and air cover from across the Pacific. It was a plan with one fatal flaw. The Navy that was supposed to save Bataan had been shattered 3 months earlier, at Pearl Harbor. There were no ships left capable of making the crossing. MacArthur was ordering men to hold a position that could not be reinforced, built on a promise the United States military no longer had the power to keep. Compounding the failure was the fact that MacArthur's own withdrawal into Bataan had been badly planned, and tons of rice, ammunition, and other critical supplies were left behind in the retreat rather than moved with the army. The verdict? An army sent to hold a position it could never reinforce, on half rations, fighting with a fraction of the supplies it should have had. Japanese superiority didn't beat this army. A flawed plan did. One built for failure before the first shot was ever fired. What followed was not a quick collapse. The combined force of Filipino and American troops held Bataan for 99 days. An extraordinary defense, given the conditions. Soldiers survived on monkey meat and a handful of grains of rice per day. Malaria, dengue fever, and dysentery tore through the ranks faster than Japanese bullets did. By April, many men had lost close to a third of their body weight. Less than half the remaining force could be considered combat effective, which at the time was defined as a soldier who could walk 100 yards without staggering and still have enough strength to fire his weapon. The defenders earned a nickname during this stretch that outlasted the battle itself: the Battling Bastards of Bataan, a phrase drawn from war correspondent Frank Hewlett's wartime dispatches, broadcast and reprinted back home as journalists tried to capture what these men were enduring. Hewlett's own words caught the mood on the peninsula with bitter clarity. No reinforcements, no relief, no hope of rescue, forgotten by the very country that had sent them there. That sentiment would follow the survivors long after the war ended. And through all of it, the man who commanded them was gone. On March 11th, under direct orders from President Roosevelt to preserve his leadership for the broader Pacific campaign, MacArthur left Bataan by PT boat, transferred to a bomber, and reached Australia. He left Major General Jonathan Wainwright in command of a starving army with no promise of relief. And the verdict? MacArthur did not disobey his orders. But an order followed is not the same as a debt repaid, and the men on Bataan were never told how small their odds truly were. By early April, the Japanese launched their final assault. Wainwright's forces, cut off from supplies, food, and ammunition, were nearing total collapse. On April 9, 1942, Major General Edward P. King, commanding the Luzon force on Bataan, made the decision Wainwright had not yet authorized. He surrendered. Roughly 12,000 Americans and an estimated 63,000 to 66,000 Filipino troops became prisoners of war. The largest contingent of American soldiers ever to surrender in the nation's history. At the moment of surrender, close to a third of them were already sick or wounded. Corregidor held out 1 month longer. On May 6th, with his remaining men trapped in the tunnels beneath the fortress island and Japanese forces closing in, Wainwright broadcast his own surrender to Japanese commander Masaharu Homma. And the verdict? 2 separate surrenders, a peninsula, then an island, forced by 2 different commanders, and neither one was the general who had promised to return. What happened next made Bataan more than a military defeat. It made it one of the darkest chapters of the entire Pacific War. The Japanese military of the era held surrender itself as a source of shame, and prisoners who had chosen captivity over death in battle were treated with a brutality that reflected it. The captured men were organized into columns and marched roughly 65 to 70 miles north, from the Bataan Peninsula to a rail line at San Fernando, under a tropical sun that regularly exceeded 100 degrees. They were given almost no food or water. Rest stops were rare and unpredictable. Men who collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, or disease and could not continue were beaten, and in many documented cases, bayoneted where they fell. Historians differ on the exact death toll. Accounts range from roughly 600 Americans and 5,000 Filipinos dead on the march itself, to broader estimates that place total deaths, including those during transport and in the earliest days of captivity, as high as 25,000. What is not disputed is what came after survival. Those who reached the rail line at San Fernando were packed into airless boxcars for the final leg to prison camps, where thousands more, by some accounts 16,000 Filipinos and at least 1,000 more Americans, died of disease, starvation, and mistreatment in the months that followed. Jonathan Wainwright, the general who had stayed when MacArthur left, was among those captured. He spent more than 2 years as a prisoner of war, moved between camps in the Philippines, Formosa, and Manchuria, before his liberation at the end of the war. He would go on to witness the formal Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri in September 1945. The same ceremony MacArthur presided over as Supreme Allied Commander. After the war, MacArthur, now the architect of the occupation of Japan, established the International Military Tribunal that tried General Homma for war crimes connected to the march. Homma was found guilty and executed in 1946. This is the verdict this channel delivers. The Bataan Death March was the direct, foreseeable result of an army ordered to hold an impossible position, commanded by a general who left before the surrender came, and defended by soldiers who were never told how alone they truly were. Douglas MacArthur kept his promise. 2 years and 8 months after boarding that PT boat, he waded ashore at Leyte and told the Philippines, "I have returned." History remembers the moment as heroic. And in the context of the broader war, the strategic patience it represented may well have been the right call for winning the Pacific. But the men who held Bataan for 99 days on a third of their rations, who survived on monkey meat and grains of rice while waiting for a navy that no longer existed, did not get to wait 2 years and 8 months. Many of them did not survive the walk to San Fernando. This channel's verdict stands. Reinforcement became a promise nobody in Washington could keep, and that is where Bataan was actually lost. Long before Japanese superiority ever entered the equation, the men who paid for that broken promise never got the choice to refuse it.